U.S. death toll from this pandemic just rose above 675,000. That's higher than the death toll from the 1918 flu pandemic more than 100 years ago. The youngest Americans are increasingly at risk in this crisis here in the United States. And tonight, they may be closer to being eligible for vaccinations. Pfizer says its vaccine is safe and effective for children ages 5 to 11 with a smaller dose, a lower dose than adults get. Let's discuss all of this and much more with Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the chief medical advisor to President Biden. Dr. Fauci, thanks so much for joining us. As we pass this very grim milestone, we're still losing an average of nearly 2,000 Americans to this virus every single day. How high do you fear, Dr. Fauci, the death toll could go, and what should we be bracing for?
Well, I don't want to be predicting how high it can go. I could only say what we do know is that we have the capability, we have the resources, we have the vaccines to stop that and turn that around, Wolf. As I've told you many times, we now today have approximately 70 million people who are eligible to be vaccinated who have not yet gotten vaccinated. If we get the overwhelming majority of those people vaccinated, we will not see the numbers that you just mentioned. 2,000 deaths per day is absolutely terrible. We've got to get that way, way down. And we can do that by vaccinating the people who are unvaccinated. Those are the people who, when they get infected, have a high degree of likelihood of getting on to a severe disease. Unvaccinated people are the ones who are driving this pandemic. We've got to get these people vaccinated, Wolf.
We certainly do. And remember, 3 months ago, about 200 Americans were dying every day from COVID-19. Now it's 2,000. That's obviously unacceptable. As you know, Dr. Fauci, Pfizer says a low-dose coronavirus vaccine is safe for children ages 5 to 11 years old. How big of a game changer would this be, and how quickly could children in this age group start actually getting vaccinated?
Well, the data is going to be presented to the FDA for application of an emergency use authorization. When the FDA looks at that, I'm sure they'll work very quickly to make a determination as officially to its safety and its immunogenicity and efficacy. So I would imagine we're talking at a matter of weeks, possibly by the end of the month, the beginning of next month, because I know the FDA really wants to do it correctly, but they want to do it quickly. With regard to the impact, we already know, Wolf, that parents are very concerned about children of that age group, particularly those who are going into the elementary school age range. We want to make sure we thoroughly protect them. Before, we were protecting them by surrounding them with people who are vaccinated. Now they themselves, if the FDA gives the approval, can be protected by their own vaccination.
As you know, Pfizer made the announcement, but did not publicly release the data behind it. Is there any reason, Dr. Fauci, to be skeptical of these findings?
No, not at all, Wolf. I have confidence that if they feel that they are going to present that to the FDA for an EUA approval, I doubt very seriously that there's anything to be concerned about in that data.
Why is it that a 12-year-old child is getting vaccinated with a full dose that is 3 times the size of the dose that will be given to an 11-year-old? Is the distinction based on development, weight, something else? Because there's a lot of confusion out there for a lot of parents who have children in that specific age range.
That's understandable, Wolf, but you've got to have a cutoff point and do something that's logistically feasible. If you start talking about multiple different doses down by weight, for example, a microgram per kilogram day a regimen, that's going to be confusing. It's going to be more confusing than what you're talking about right now. So you have to have a cutoff point. The decision was children from 11 down, instead of getting the 30 microgram dose, will get a 10 microgram dose. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And parents should not be confused or concerned about that.
Last Friday, FDA vaccine advisors recommended boosters for Americans 65 and older and those who are at high risk. You've predicted that the FDA decision about boosters will likely be revised as more data becomes available. What kind of data would change the calculus here, Dr. Fauci?
Well, there'll be data that are coming in from our own cohorts who the CDC and others are following. as well as from the Israelis, who will continually have data for us, both for the waning of protection, particularly against severe disease in younger groups, would trigger the FDA to look at that and see if they want to expand the recommendation to go much younger than 65. All of that data is going to be coming in real time on a weekly basis. Also very important, Wolf, when you get down to the younger group, particularly a young men, where the potential for the rare adverse effect of myocarditis exists, that it'll be very important to get good safety data in younger people, particularly men. If we do, then I think it's likely as we go on over the coming weeks, we'll see a more and more of an expansion of the recommendation for the boosters for those individuals.
The booster shot conversation, as you well know, has been centered strictly around the Pfizer vaccine. But what about the tens of millions of Americans, Dr. Fauci, who received the Moderna or the Johnson & Johnson shots? When will they be able to start getting boosters?
Well, they have not been forgotten, that's for sure. What's going to happen is that the data associated with the boosters in those individuals will be coming to the FDA, I would imagine, in a couple to 3 weeks. They will examine it in the same way as they did before, and hopefully we'll get a recommendation that would provide equity among people who have had different products in their vaccination regimen.
The Brazilian president, who's currently in the United States for the United Nations General Assembly in New York, says he doesn't need to get vaccinated because he previously had the coronavirus and says his immune system is strong enough. What do you say to that argument?
Well, there is some truth to that in the fact that people who are who have gotten infected and recover do have a degree of protection. What we don't know, Wolf, is what the duration of that protection is and what the range of protection against variants are. So you don't want to deny that there is certain protection by people who were previously vaccinated. What we do know that's really important is that if you vaccinate people who've recovered from getting infected, that you boost up their level of immunity very high, far higher than just plain vaccination alone. So that's the reason why the CDC still recommends that those who've recovered from natural infection still go on and get vaccinated.
Yeah, just like the former President Trump, he had COVID, but he still got vaccinated, which is the right thing to do. The U.S. is also relaxing travel restrictions on fully vaccinated international air travelers. Should we expect to see restrictions requiring domestic air travelers to be fully vaccinated as well?
Well, as I mentioned before, Wolf, that is on the table for discussion. There has been no determination about that, but all of those things are continually discussed, and I can say it's still on the table for consideration, but it hasn't been decided about what to do with that. We do know that the president has said that for domestic flights, if people refuse to wear masks, they're doubling the fines on those individuals.